Bold prediction season is here. We got one question. I need one answer from you. And the question is, what would you put your money on this season? And out of all those things you'd put your money on, what is the boldest prediction that you'd be willing to bet on? We got 4 of them tonight, but we got about 1,000 of them to go. We may not get to all of them before kickoff, but the best will be featured prominently on the show. So let's take a look. What is the first bold prediction of 2023? Stephen from Blairsville, Pennsylvania. Here we go. Penn State makes the playoff with an undefeated regular season. And then we had some win margins over Ohio State and Michigan. Let's just focus on the core principle here. Penn State makes the playoff. Undefeated regular season. What kind of boldness grade are we going to put on this? Penn State going undefeated in the regular season is an 8.25 for me on the boldness scale. I just upped it, Jesse. I know we agreed to 8. I went 8.25. This is not off the charts. In years past, this would have been well into the 9.5 range. So Penn State's 2023 schedule stacks up about like this. They've got a bunch of games they should win, then their bye week, then they get into October, and they'll be well rested for UMass for whatever that's worth. But they've got Ohio State October 21st. They've got Michigan November 11th, well spaced out. This is the year they go to Columbus. This is the year Michigan comes to State College. My question is, are those the 2 games? In other words, could West Virginia trip them up? Could Illinois trip them up? Could Iowa trip them up? Well, yes, but this is the most talented version of Penn State Franklin's had probably since they won the Big Ten back in 2016. You have heard me well document my feelings towards what they could be defensively. Great 1-2 tandem in the backfield. Receiver room, I don't think will just be established week 1. They've got the Cephas kid coming in from Kent State in the summer. Drew Aller at quarterback. Another question about him is not what he'll be in week 1. Like I just told you, their schedule's not front-loaded. It's what will he be in week 7, week 8, week 9. They've got time to, I guess for lack of a better phrase, ease him in. Now, that's not ever what they would call it, but I'm just telling you, when you're favored by double digits every week for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, you don't have the sense of over-the-cliff urgency that you would if you had Ohio State in week 2, for example. This is an 8.25 for me. Penn State undefeated regular season, 8.25. There'll be a dog at Ohio State. I know we've got early lines out on Michigan, Penn State. That is towards the end of the year. It's in November. Let's see how things play out, and then let's see what that point spread is when we actually arrive at that game. All right, next up, we're going down south here. Immunity. From Lilburn, Georgia, Vol Addict says, Tennessee not only beats Georgia, but they beat them by 2 scores, and they go on to play LSU for the SEC championship. This is very specific. So they're going to beat Georgia by 9 or more. That's in Knoxville, at least. And then not only that, we got to parlay this. I don't know why you guys do this, but they got to parlay this with LSU winning the West. So Tennessee could drum Georgia by 40, but if Bama wins the West, you were still wrong. I don't know, but it's your prediction. It's not mine. This is a 9.5. If you would have told me one or the other, then I could get you down in the 8 range. Tennessee beats Georgia by 2 possessions. Let's address that one first. Tennessee plays Georgia this year, second to last week of the season. How about that, by the way? It used to be a lot earlier. They play them November 18th. So whatever Joe Milton is at quarterback, we'll know by then. Whatever Carson Beck is at quarterback, we'll know by then. Colin, could you show me Georgia's schedule for just a second? I know that I just caught you flipping graphics, my bad. But Georgia, famously at this point, even though it's still May, has a very weak schedule by SEC standards. This is not the kind of show where we blame Georgia for that. I would rather blame the rest of the SEC West for that. Georgia, they go to Auburn. They will have gone to Vanderbilt. They will have played Florida and Jacksonville. They will not have faced any kind of remote hostility on the road that's in the same galaxy as what they'll deal with at Neyland later in the year. Now, it's one thing if Tennessee has disappointed and they're already a 3-loss team or something like that, but it's another thing if Georgia has to deal with a dose of what Bama had to deal with last year, where one or both of them are undefeated maybe, and all of a sudden you walk in, it's just like a big orange hornet's nest, which, Colin, could be the new nickname of the stadium if you guys ever get tired of what you currently call it. So the whole quarterback thing notwithstanding, the battle-tested nature of Tennessee by this point is what could be curious, could be interesting. So they will have already played Bama. They will have already played A&M. They will have already played some really good rosters. Whether those are good teams this year, Bama will be good. A&M's another story, but they will have played some really good NFL-loaded rosters. Georgia will not have necessarily faced that. Now, if Georgia's skull-dragging everybody by 30, it does not matter. But if this is the kind of year where Georgia's still winning games, but they're kind of unimpressive or they're underachieving, they're not quite covering spreads while they're doing it, it's the kind of thing where you could build up the whole year and you could be looking at the Tennessee game and you could watch Georgia sneak past Auburn and they could sneak past Florida, and all the while in the back of your mind you're saying, they got to play Tennessee eventually, though. That could be the kind of year we have, or it could be totally irrelevant. And there's a reason why Georgia's minus 115 odds to win the SEC championship, and Tennessee's down there at plus 1,400. Those numbers could just validate themselves. I'm putting a 9.5 on this, though. If you're telling me they're winning the East and they're beating Georgia by 2 scores to do it, and they're facing a specific team out of the West, that's a bridge too far for me to go anything less than a 9. Speaking of bold predictions, I've got another one here for you. The model really hates this one. From Peachtree City, Owen said Sark has never won 10 games as a head coach. The streak will remain intact as Texas, misses a bowl game this year. So the smoke starts to come out of the model. Okay, the model would like Texas to win the AFC next year. So the model is permanently drunk on Texas. But even I have to look at this and say, what are we talking about? Miss a bowl game? They get a bowl of food in week 1 and rice before they go to Bama. Yes, there's a tough game in week 2, which they are a single-digit underdog in, might I add. But elsewhere, Texas is favored to win the Big 12. That's not news. They have been before. I actually agree with those numbers this year. The over-under win total is 9.5. So you're telling me they're missing that by, 4 games? Or I guess you can't win 5.5. So they're gonna win 5 games where they're over-under win total of 9.5. They're favored to win the Big 12. They're plus 1,600 to win the national championship game. Now, I am cognizant of one thing. And that's the only reason I didn't make this a 10. I made it a 9.5 on the boldness scale instead of a 10. This time last year, I sat right here, and someone predicted A&M to win like 4 games. And I had the foolish thought to label them a disaster-proof roster. That just means they have a level of talent that makes them immune to falling off a cliff. They could underachieve. They could win 7 or 8 games, but there's no way they would just fall below bowl contention. Well, they did. So I will never say never. But I will say Texas is making a bowl, and they're going to make a really, really handsome bowl. This is not one where they're, fighting to get to Shreveport. All due respect. Texas is making a bowl. They got the 19th. They're 19th in the country in returning production this year. Their roster, like I just said about A&M, their roster is too good to allow this to happen. And also, this is not a team that disproportionately relies on one superstar quarterback. They've got Malik Murphy sitting in there, which a ton of teams would love to have as their starter right now. So even if they have the worst happen, and that is a quarterback goes down for the season, even then, they've got backup options at the most important position. So Texas missing a bowl, 9.5. Lastly, for today, this one was out there a little bit. Eric said Colorado's going to have a better record than Miami. Eric, I don't think you're right. The preseason over-under win totals here are Colorado over-under 3.5 wins. That's up from 3. And Miami over-under 7.5 wins. I would be curious if Eric expects a surge from Colorado, or he expects a drop-off from Miami, or he expects sort of a meeting in the middle at around 5 or 6 wins. This is a tall, tall task for Deion Sanders in Colorado to pull off in year 1. And that's not even considering Miami could just flat out hit their over and win 9 games or something like that. So I'm putting this at a 9.75. Miami, obviously coming off a less than desirable finish last year. Colorado's coming off a 1-win campaign. Miami went to work in the portal. Also, the infusion of new ideas offensively and defensively, a couple of new coordinators down there. They probably won't click right out of the gate, but it's a big thing to have Tyler Van Dyke still there, a guy that just a year ago, 2 years ago really, if you count last year, showed you he can play the position at a really high level. And Shannon Dawson's the offensive coordinator down there. I think they'll be more than okay. Whether they challenge to win the ACC doesn't matter in relation to this prediction. You said they're going to have a worse record than Colorado. That I have a hard time seeing. So I'm going to put a 9.75 on that one. And with that, bold prediction season is back.